Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is April 16th, and together with Goran and Robert, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So in our last episode, we had Kartik talk about the Azure Backup solution for SAP HANA. We got quite a lot of feedback and questions. So in this video, we want to take another look at Azure Backup in general. And for this, Robert actually volunteered to lead us through some scenarios. But as always, before we go there, let's take a quick look at this week's news. So I actually want to start with the announcements, or the announcement that Microsoft would acquire Nuance, which obviously, or I think is very well known for its voice recognition and stuff like that. But actually, the main focus, I think, and that was also talked about during the call with Satya Nadella and Scott Guthrie, is really about the healthcare experience. Because actually, if we look back, Nuance and Microsoft, we had already announced a collaboration end of last year, and there it was also already about the integration of Dragons with Microsoft Teams and stuff like that. And now I think we're really trying to take this one huge step forward, obviously, and really look at specific industry, and obviously with healthcare. That's the starting point. That's the most important topic there for Nuance. So I'm excited actually what will happen there. I mean, think of the industry cloud solutions that we have announced, and then potentially this could be a beautiful fit there to strengthen these industry cloud offerings. So quite interesting acquisition, I would say. The next thing, we had Ram talk about Azure Monitor, and if you remember, when he presented, he was saying this is still in private preview. Well, now, good news, 2 days ago, the Azure Monitoring solution for and with the SAP NetWeaver provider, I mean, that's obviously the most important thing, that is now in public preview. So there's some content, some blog posts related to this. But if you were excited about the things that Ram shared in our podcast a few weeks ago, then definitely check out this public preview here for the Azure Monitoring solution. Then another quick thing, Roman Broich again created a beautiful. It's not a how-to guide yet, but a beautiful flow basically, where he talks about using Azure Synapse with SAP. And what I actually very much like is he's using this with the SAP SFlight model. So I think this sample scenario that has been around for, I don't know, tens of years, I would say. And what I like there is actually that this is available in every SAP system. I mean, you can easily generate the SFlight or activate the SFlight scenario in your SAP system, and then if you follow the steps that Roman outlines here, the different scenarios with the different personas, then it's really nice to see how you can actually get the information from the SAP system and really visualize it or transform it, obviously make it available in Synapse, and then work with the data in Azure. Again, this is not yet a hands-on tutorial like what we are used to from Roman when we look at the Teams integration or some other fantastic blogs or GitHub repos that he has created. But it's still a very nice overview of the main steps, and you can see there are some code snippets and stuff like that in there. So it's a good first flow, and I'm sure if you read through this, if you have some more comments or feedbacks, then I'm sure Roman will also work on this and make it even more detailed, so you can follow this along step by step. Another thing that was just released yesterday, Dennis van Kempen has a nice summary blog post here on the SAP community network about identity. And in this specific part, it's really about Azure Active Directory integration, how I mean, not only, but how you can combine Azure Active Directory with the SAP Identity Service. There's a lot of documentation, but there's also some videos, some references here to the video tutorials that are available. There's also some documentation on how to set it up, how to set up the trust and stuff like that. So if you are interested in the single sign-on, in the identity provision scenario, then I think this blog post from Dennis is a perfect start to really, test out the integration of Azure Active Directory, SAP Cloud Platform Identity Service, and so on. In a similar context, Martin Räpple, so again, identity, again, single sign-on, wrote his part 4 of the principal propagation. So remember, we talked about part 1, 2, and 3. We had Martin also on the podcast a few weeks ago, where he showed us really part 3 and the whole setup, how to do a single sign-on with principal propagation from a Microsoft application, from Teams, into the SAP system on-premise using the SAP Cloud Connector and stuff like that. And now he has enhanced this scenario using Power Virtual Agent. So part of the Power Platform, the low-code, no-code platform from Microsoft, there's this Power Virtual Agent functionality that allows you to create a chatbot in Teams very easily. But obviously there, you also want to have single sign-on, the single sign-on experience from Teams, from an user that is authenticated in Teams to the SAP system. And as always with Martin, he outlines this very, very detailed. So you can see here the chatbot on or the Power Virtual Agent scenario, the relevant steps. And then obviously, in order to get the authentication, he calls certain Power Automate flows, where the whole token exchange that he had shown us, or that is also part of part 3, obviously, of his blog series, where these token exchange are encapsulated basically with these Power Automate flows. And then, well, yeah, you get the whole scenario again, so that really from Teams, from your Power Virtual Agents, you can actually call to the SAP system and retrieve data from there. And I think this is really, really the crucial piece, obviously, because you are starting from a Microsoft authenticated user, and now you want to access your SAP system. And obviously, you don't want to provide username and password. You don't want to hard code some information. And in this blog post, yeah, Martin really outlines all the required steps to really have this end-to-end single sign-on experience. So again, if you have not done yet, and go through part 1, 2, and 3, and definitely also check out part 4 and follow his guidelines to set up single sign-on end-to-end. Then 2 last announcements quickly. SAP has the SAP Sustainability Summit coming up. So really an event, a 2-day event dedicated on sustainability. I mean, we had talked about Climate 21, about the initiatives that SAP is really pushing forward there. What I really like there, obviously, is I mean, this is really something that is important. This is really something that is very relevant. But it's great to see that SAP is investing there a lot. I mean, we also talked about Microsoft investing or taking the whole sustainability topic really serious. So I'm looking forward to this event. There are quite a lot of speakers. You can see Julia White, obviously former Microsoft employee as well, joining. But then there's also Luka Mucic, Thomas Sauer-Essig, and Scott Russell also attending. So I think this will also be a really nice event, and I think definitely worth watching. Good, then the last thing that I quickly want to mention, SAPPHIRE Now. SAPPHIRE Now 21 is now scheduled, is now, has now a date, basically. So it will be an event that is in 2 parts, basically. So there will be a global event on June 2nd, with Christian Klein, obviously. So this will really be the global event, and then there are certain regional events. So for EMEA and the Americas, it's June 7th and 10th. And then in the other regions, there will be, in the following weeks, there will be, local SAPPHIRE events. So definitely also, I think, very interesting. Will be interesting to see what SAP will talk about, SAP Rise, and other obviously things that are currently happening there. So I think also definitely
very brave 4 days online.
Yes, yeah, that's true. This will be also interesting. But I think, I mean, obviously, we all have learned a lot about these virtual events, and hopefully, these 4 days will be. I guess it will not be 24/7.
Yeah,
it will be some dedicated sessions. So let's see how it will turn out. Good. With these a few updates. Let's hand it over to Robert and
to me. Okay.
Yes.
So as you mentioned, as you mentioned last time, nobody wanted to discuss about backup.
Yes.
Because somehow it's half boring, half annoying. But it's always fun to discuss about backup, and I decided to take a little bit funny approach. Let's make fun on a Friday afternoon here in Europe time, and let's discuss a little bit about backup and restore. Surprise, surprise, restore is also important.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if we are talking about backup and we are talking about successful backup, there's no something like successful backup. There's only successful restore, because backup with without valid restore is not good backup. And I will try to somehow put all that together and somehow go through this classical naming convention and try to, in this forest of naming convention, try to have some clarification there, and also point on something what we already discussed with Katik. Katik is good pronunciation for colleague?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Katik, yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm always afraid with our Indian colleagues. I don't want to.
Robert, also, me too. I don't know. We would need to ask him.
Okay. He will complain. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so on today's agenda, let's discuss about consistency. This is a very interesting topic, always to discuss about that. Let's discuss about when we are talking about system application database backup, what is actually backup there? Database backup option, we already discussed last Friday about SAP and SAP HANA and our support for Azure Backup for SAP HANA. We will not go deep in that, but we'll just revision what we covered last time. And of course, in general, what we can do in Azure. So the goal, it's in general very short, simple sentence is let's make a fun. Let's try to go through this topic and figure out, okay, what we know and what we can somehow learn new, and I hope we will all together learn something new. And I think the most funny part is always that part. It's always, I think this is in IT sometimes in config corner, if you don't know what to do, you can always start to discuss about consistency and backup. Because, okay, inconsistent backup, I think is more or less clear. This is the oldest backup what we are doing for a long time. It's in most cases going in the direction of classical file system backup. So we have a disk. I want to create a backup of that disk. And I'm starting like in this example, for example, in 10 p.m. And around, let's say I have a huge disk and around 7 p.m. I already back up my bob.txt file. And if I continue and I'm changing that file later, after time, actually, I'm not including that change anymore, because in most cases, when you are doing inconsistent backup on the start, backup will do the catalog of everything what he need to cover in that next backup step. And he will simply, when you are done with one backup, he will not consider that like a change. And of course, in the same fashion is going, if you have something new, backup will simply ignore, because this is not part of catalog collection on the beginning. I mean, there's a different implementation of that, but just to somehow try to bring on the surface what is inconsistent backup. Because on the end, when I'm done with backup, I cannot say I have consistent backup because there are some potential changes, there are some potential new files and so on. So this is a classical old way of thinking around backup. Then the next step is that we try somehow to find a way where we'll just say, hey, hit the pause and then we'll do the snapshot. And it's more going in direction this crash consistent backup, where we just find a time and say, okay, hit the brake, yeah, and just do the snapshot. But in general, from system perspective or application perspective, for anything what is running in that, for example, virtual machine, that environment, that operating system, or that application level or database level or whatever it's running that virtual machine have no clue what is happening. Yeah, so it's just snapshot of all what is currently there, and actually from application perspective or for database perspective, this can be crash consistent backup. I mean, if you are going carefully now in direction of database is more or less always crash consistent. So why is called crash? Because it's same like you switch off and switch on your PC. It's the same status. So because you don't know what you will face when you start next time. Yeah. And in most cases today, today databases are very good in recovering. Yeah, but sometimes may happen the database will go to analyze the log and next start. And database need to decide, okay, I will go in the next step, so I will commit what I find there and it's valid, or I will decide to go back and say, hey, roll back, I don't like that. Classical example is where I have some challenges with this kind of backup is if I try to transfer money from one account to another account, I can remove the money from one account and then do the snapshot, and then I will not mark actually the transferring is finalized on another account, and if I recover, I will not see the valid situation. There's many complex business scenario, business use cases, or let's call them business transactions, which need to, they face a challenge with this crash consistent mindset. And of course, there's solutions like auto recover. So in most cases, you will go there and you try to figure out when you start your system, okay, what is wrong, and try to clean that. In most cases, this is a chicken egg problem. You need to really sometimes have the expert system to be able to recover that. Or on the other side, you need to be very careful how you're building your system in a way that every logical transaction is somehow combined in physical transaction, and this can be also complex. And I think this is one of the cases why today we are going in those decoupling mindset. I mean, we always dream that we have decoupled systems, that we don't have too much connection between our components. And today with microservices, actually, we are going very heavily in that direction, stateful. And if you think like that, so you have many stateful components and stateless components, and the only stateful components you have, it's database. So then it's much easier also from that consistency perspective to guarantee that your complete system, complete landscape is actually consistent. Today, still in client server, or when we are discussing about SAP, this is actually can be very dangerous. So we need to be very careful. So if you have something like underlying the storage system and you are just doing the storage snapshot, you actually doing the crash consistent. These storage systems today are very good and very complex, and they are doing that snapshot in very milliseconds. And the chance that you will be inconsistent is actually very low, but still without restore it, you will never know. So the best way is to go to next step. And this is called application consistent backup. Where is very simple. I mean, if you want to have a relationship between two personas, you always need to somehow start to communicate between those two personas if you want to have a good relationship. And it's same like in this use case. So you will start with backup. You will notify all your listeners, so-called writers, and then on that part, all writers will say, hey, just wait, I need to do something. I will do the freeze. I will freeze all my next steps. I will commit my changes. Data will do some save points. operating system will flash the cache from disk, for example, prepare everything for one consistent snapshot. And this is the only way how you can guarantee that you will be consistent across your components. The good example of that is volume shadow copy service. This is a very, very old, I think it's coming from Windows NT. It's developed in Windows. It's also, we also, I think, implement in a Linux that. And it's going in that direction, what I already explained. So requester will send a notification, hey, I want to start to do some snapshot. Then writers will receive this event. Writers will prepare everything. Writers can send the, I think, XML out and then communicate with each other, agree what is the valid status. And when everything is there, where all writers say, I'm done, then actually the service will notify the hardware or software provider, and then you'll execute the snapshot. And of course, if you go one step back, when I'm done, I will notify listeners again, and then continue with working. And this is what many storage systems are doing, like NetApp, for example. So if you start to want to execute snapshot, you will notify the HANA. HANA will do save points, and the snapshot, NetApp will do the snapshot. And this happened very quickly. Yeah. And this is nothing new. This is a traditional way of doing that properly. And in many cases in documentation or some blogs, you will see that people are thinking about or mentioning application consistent backup and think this is also the database consistent backup. From my personal perspective, I think it's a little bit confusing because application itself in that scenario where we're talking about database is database itself. Of course, this is one application, but this is from engine perspective. But if you want to do consistent snapshot of your database or consistent backup of your database need to know which database you want to make consistent. Yeah. So there's no something like make a consistent engine. Yeah. So because there's a system database and all stuff. So you can maybe vertically make them consistent, but correlation between those databases are not consistent. You cannot guarantee that. In most cases, we are talking about database per database consistent backup, because this is only what database can guarantee. Yeah? And so this is somehow, from my perspective, might sometimes confusing when people are talking about application consistent and they are thinking database consistent, but it's actually, you cannot have database consistent backup if you don't have mechanism like application consistent backup, like notifying database, hey, I'm starting the snapshot. Database will say, hey, wait, I want to do save points. I'll do the save points. Now I'm done. You will do the snapshot and I will continue. Yeah? And froze IO communication, and I will do the snapshot, and I'm free to go and work in my normal mode. So this is more or less what is happening. It is always a funny way how to interpret that, but it's very simple to understand how to work with that. It's why I'm mentioning that, because if we want to go a little bit further, we need to somehow understand which other options we have in to approach to backup something, in this case SAP landscapes. So it's also when we're discussing, I mean, this is not, I'm not talking explicitly here about SAP systems. It's any system. Yeah. So if I have different applications and those applications are using database and they are somehow part of one landscape, one system. So to say that I have a consistent system backup mean that I need to notify all components of my system. They need to be aware of that. They need to somehow freeze all together. And I mean, this is in most cases not happening. In most cases, you know, on application level, application instances or application server, for example, in SAP world, will be nice that they know that you are going in application set, that you are going in application consistent backup, and then they will stop the communication, they will clean the memory, or they will finalize the log or whatever, just dummy examples. And then they will notify database, now I'm free, you can continue. SAP does not have that. So in most cases, when we are talking about database backup or SAP backup, we are talking about database backup in SAP system, because everything is anyhow there. and we need to be sure that that database is actually in consistent status when we are starting with our database backup. Which backup options we have? We already discussed last time the SAP HANA database backup in Azure, or Azure Backup for SAP HANA is actually what we discussed last time. I'll just share the documentation. So this is actually what we discussed last time. So this is a SAP HANA database backup. So actually, this is very nice documentation because you can simply go through this documentation in parallel with our video from last Friday, and you will see that our colleague is actually just presenting exactly the same steps which are documented here. So you can simply go and try by yourselves following those steps, and also restore the same option. Of course, we have other options in Azure. Of course, we can use the Azure Backup for VM, so we can complete VM. We can also, this is now in a general availability, we can also do the direct disk snapshot. So when you are starting Azure VM backup, we can also select which disk we want to backup. But here, we can really select independently of VM. So we are not actually backupping VM. We are just simply selecting the disk from the list of disks which are available in that subscription where we are running that Azure disk backup, and we will simply execute that part. So the best way to understand that is if I go to Backup Center, and for example, if I invoke the backup, you will see that I have an option, HANA is there, Azure disk is there, blob, and all other stuff. But if you go in old way, if you go to Recovery Service Vault, open one of these Recovery Service Vault and start the backup, you will see there's no much options there, because this is a new functionality what we have in Backup Center, where we are trying to organize everything in one dashboard, in one central place. This is, the reason behind why it's called Center, Backup Center. And if you select the Azure disk, for example, you need to select the vault. This is backup vault. This is not recovery service vault. This is another vault. You need to create that vault. If you don't have it, you need to create it. I have one small test here. Standard that vault need to be somehow dedicated for one subscription, resource group, and location, and so on. And you need to do this. Select which storage redundancy you want to, local redundant or geo redundant. And then you will select the backup policy. I think it's clear. And now it's interesting. Now you will see that I will select from all this what I have in this subscription. Of course, if I have multiple subscriptions, I can select some disk from other subscriptions, say, okay. But you see, there's no notation about virtual machines. So there's a owner. That owner is some machines, but I can independently of that machine select those disks, and I will get the snapshot of those disks. Yeah? So I'm not actually executing Azure VM backup. So I'm going directly to the disk and executing the snapshot. And those disk snapshots are incremental. So first time will be, let's say, big, but second and third time I will just have delta. So I just have differences. And this is very, very nice and very attractive. And what is very nice on the end, I will have that in my backup center here under the monitoring, and I will see the progress and all that stuff. I think it's very nice. So why is that part interesting to discuss about this Azure disk backup? And because if we go, for example, in this direction, so if we say that we have one system, and let's say in the database, we have, of course, we have one disk for operating system and multiple maybe disk in a RAID for data or for log disk, standard, for example, SAP HANA configuration in Azure. And let's say that if we have one disk only for backup, what we can do, one of the options is that we can use a standard database. Any database, can be HANA, can be Oracle, can be anything else, which are not, for example, supported from Azure Backup today. For example, like Oracle or DB2, I can use the normal Oracle tooling or SQL or SAP Oracle backup tooling to backup that database on the disk, for example, this backup disk, And then, for example, after that is successfully done, I can use AZ copy and copy that to Azure Blob Storage. But also, I can maybe, when I'm done with that copy process and backup, for example, I know that backup is done in 3 o'clock in the morning, I can maybe create the snapshot of this disk using the Azure Disk Backup, this new functionality, and just execute the snapshot of the disk so that I have a actually copy of that backup. So I can combine that. I can copy that to blob storage. I can do the snapshot. So there's some option to do that. There's some manual steps there. There's some requests for scripting. There's no nice way to monitoring end-to-end scenario, but it's probably a category of the most attractive from pricing perspective. And probably this is maybe good for small customers where RTO is maybe 6 hours or more, where we have a time to play something like that. But I would like to think about that a little bit further and say, okay, hey, this is maybe cheaper than using Azure Backup in any direction with Azure VM Backup, Azure Backup for HANA, Azure Disk Backup. But still, in Azure Backup, with complete Azure Backup, what I'm getting is I'm getting complete managed service. Yeah. So we need to think about that. It's not just that I receive something, that I'm getting some functionality. I'm receiving completely managed service because I don't need to think about redundancy. I have received SLA. So this is really managed by Azure, by Microsoft. Yeah? So I can back up SAP HANA, and we already have seen last time that we have a great roadmap for that. Azure Backup support for other databases also coming. Then we will improve that Azure Backup functionality more and more. Then Azure Backup Center is a new functionality where I have a nice dashboard. Then Azure Backup Center and Azure Lighthouse is also supported, which means I can cover multiple tenants or Azure accounts, cross my customers in one dashboard. I mean, there's many advantages of using backup. So I will really stop and think, is this really better to somehow go a few euros cheaper and do some scripting instead of simply rely on something which is already managed? Of course, we can always say, but Robert, Azure Backup does not cover all use cases. It's not yet on the level where we can say it's full-blown backup product like some professional tools, what we have like Veritas, Veeam, Commvault, and so on. So those famous old backup tooling which customers are using for years and years on-premise. But those tooling are actually also supported in Azure. So if customer already have some of those toolings, like for example Commvault, and they want to continue to using that, they can just simply go to Azure Marketplace, for example, browse all applications, go to the storage, select the backup and recovery, and here I can see that I have a Veeam, I have Veritas, I have a Commvault. So if I, for example, select the Commvault, I have an option to see, okay, how much will cost me that virtual machine? What about licenses? So this is bring your own license. So you need to see with Commvault, okay, can you use your existing on-premise licenses? And if not, what you need to do? And if I want to use that, what I will actually need to do, I will select which of those options or software versions I would like to use in my Azure landscape. And then you will see that what I'm getting is very famous wizard the same wizard when I'm creating the virtual machine. Okay, this is nobody's reading this license stuff. And now you see, this is a wizard, standard create virtual machine wizard. What is the difference is only that image here is actually the Commvault image. So this image is prepared from our Commvault partner. Customer will actually decide how big is that image. So there's a suggestion which size to use that from Commvault. But everything else, networking, disk management, and everything, I will decide on my own what is the best way, where I want to put that. So I have everything under control. But still, this virtual machine I need to maintain later. Yeah? So maybe also I need to be sure that I backup this machine if something go wrong, that I can restore quickly and continue using that Commvault client, and so on and so on. So balance is always there. The best way, I mean, Commvault is very nice. Many options are there. You can use, for example, from the same user interface, you can select the backup and automatically send to Azure Blob Storage, so you don't need to do some client scripting. Software is covering there for you. So there's some functionality which I already mentioned, like extra options. So you can use that with some of those third-party partnering tooling already there. In our side, you cannot use some of those options. So, but we are slowly going that direction to have all those functionality. So, I mean, it's if my recommendation, if customer like to use third-party tooling which they're already using on premise, just free to go in Azure with those tooling, and maybe slowly in parallel just check, okay, in which combination this native Azure functionality or services are maybe better fit. And as I mentioned before, I would like to have some small takeaways on the end. So before actually thinking about, okay, you know, I'll want to save some 50 euro per month or 300 euro per month. I mean, please think about what you will get in that managed service. Yeah, it's not just one service backup versus backup on the premise, because we should try to avoid discussion or thinking in direction. Okay, here we're discussing about apples, here we're discussing about oranges. We need to just be sure that we are somehow have the same weight on both sides, because this is managed service, and maybe it's not perfect for all your requirements, but still it's very good progress. If you just take a look what we did in last 6 months or last year with that service, it's promising that we'll continue to go aggressively with that service. So on another side, as I mentioned, third party is very valid option. You can, especially if you're living in a hybrid scenario, if you have a hybrid landscape, one part of on-premise, one part on and Azure, maybe for this first phase of migration to Azure, is best to continue to using existing tool and then later see how you can migrate to the next steps. And yeah, my favorite sentence is snapshot is not backup. Be careful when you're thinking what snapshot is and how you're using those snapshots. Yeah? And very important is, you know, there's no something like successful backup, only restore can be successful. So please test everything what you backup. I know that on a premise mentality, this is more or less equal to very expensive process, because if you want to do restore, you need to simulate, for example, your productive landscape, and you need to have a space for that. And if you have a very complex productive landscape, this can be very expensive. And this is a part where you can use the Azure, because Azure is very flexible. You can very quickly set up the landscape, test your restore, and when you're done, just delete everything and use that flexibility in cloud. So you can combine that in hybrid scenarios very well. So that's all, Olga, what I prepared today. So you have, I assume that you have some questions, or you want to comment something on that.
Yes, of course. No, thank you, Robert. I think that was really good. What you mentioned with the third-party support, I think that's really something that I also see with a lot of customers, that they are very used to, for example, using Commvault on premise, and they're perfectly fine. They have colleagues trained on this, they know how to operate this, and now they are starting their migration into Azure, and then all of a sudden, obviously, they also need to look after a backup scenario in Azure. And I think it is obviously perfect to start and to continue to use with Commvault there. As you said, it's super easy to set up the Commvault experience, and it was nice to see in the portal how you basically then just need to click next, and then Commvault is installed. But as you rightly pointed out, this is a one-time thing. This is not a managed service that is provided. So I liked your idea or your thought that, well, maybe you start with Commvault, maybe you start with some third-party applications that are also really specialized. I mean, looking at Oracle backup or something like that, or DB2 backup, there Commvault has already some really beautiful solutions. But maybe you can already start looking at some of the backups done with Azure Backup and really have a managed service, and then maybe you can really take the tools that are already good, are really working for your scenario, and use them, but over time maybe migrate more and more solutions into Azure Backup as really as a managed service.
Yeah, I mean, for example, take a look. This is actually the document what we create together with our partner, Commvault. And I mean, you know, we are not ignoring our partners. We are still working with them, and we are creating the best practices together. And this is a very good example. Yeah, this is a very nice document where we actually explain how to use Commvault in Azure to protect SAP HANA. Yeah? I mean, you know, there's many options, and I think it is also good. You know, sometimes if you have too much options, it's also not good. But I think in this case, it's very good because backup is a very complex topic, and it depends on your landscape, depends on your habits also, or your policies. Yeah, what is always clear, you know, on the end, the storage what you need to have based on your policy is always the same. Doesn't matter if you're using Commvault, is using Azure Backup, more or less you will have the same price from the storage perspective. You need to reserve, if you need 70 terabyte of storage, you need 70 terabyte, doesn't matter in which case. Yeah, maybe you will have some compression rate better in one solution than in another, but I mean, you will not save something like 50% of your storage. You will probably save some few percentage. So there's always a service level and storage level. So this service level is very important. Go in direction, okay, I like that service level, or I like from combine with Microsoft Azure Backup and see what can use from there, because it's cloud native, and it's managed service is much easier, and I don't need to maintain anything. I just actually, let's say, need to click there and do it.
Yeah.
I think still it's, you know, it's a topic which we need to invest a lot from our side, and also I think it's a very interesting topic because probably you know, improving complete storage in a complete in cloud environment or in general storage like a topic, probably we'll see in the future more and more better options how to do the storage, but this also need to reflect on architecture of applications. This combination, which we'll see much more progress, I think, in the future.
Yeah, and I think this combination, or also, I mean, the choice that we are providing, that we're saying, well, of course you can continue to use Commvault, and actually it's not fairly complicated to set up. You really go to the marketplace and you quickly run through it, and then you have Commvault. Or if there are other scenarios, you can use other third-party backup solutions, or again, you can use Azure Backup. So we really provide customers a choice to run their backup solutions. And again, maybe Azure Backup might not be the ideal solution if you have hundreds and thousands of virtual machines that you need to back up or something like that. Very specialized cases with Oracle, with DB2 and whatever, and then it makes absolutely sense to go with a specialized partner that has a good offering there. But then maybe there's another customer that has just his one SAP HANA database running on Azure, and then for them, obviously, it's very convenient to have a fully managed service that allows them to back up.
But you know, in Azure, you have also other options which you didn't face on premise, you know, because if you take a look on sandbox systems or development system, or maybe part of our productive system, which you don't need 24/7, and you want to snooze them, So, you know, then you need to actually back up the image of the VM. So it's crash course system, because everything which is online is crash course system from backup perspective, because backup have no clue how you get that image. And this is another perspective. You know, you have other options that that part of the landscape which you anyhow snoozed over the night, you can also do some kind of cheap backup solutions or cheap snapshot solution, because it's completely different reality, so to say. Huh? Yeah, I mean it's very, very as you mentioned, annoying topic. Yeah, but it's like everything else. It can be complex, but can be also very simple. Depends on landscape, depends of requirements, and I think on the Azure Backup, in most cases, you may see that that this culture changes between on-premise mentality and cloud mentality are in conflict. Yeah, so sometimes you need to somehow put the brake and say, hey, what I can do better now in Azure. Yeah? And this is very crucial, that you just hit the brake and say, hey, maybe in Azure I can do something much better and cheaper.
Yeah, and
I mean, I hope that somehow I shaked a little bit the topic. Yeah, it's very funny topic. There's some misunderstanding always. Yeah, I present my interpretation of that. I'm not saying that it's correct. It's just my honest interpretation. I think it's fun. Yeah, and what our colleague presented last week, it's amazing that how big progress we already have there.
Yeah, and as you said, I mean, in the cloud, there's a lot of innovation happening all the time. So very soon we'll have additional functionalities also with Azure Backup, and then maybe then some things that stopped you from using Azure Backup or stopped you from using other services, all of a sudden they're resolved, and then you can actually go ahead. Yeah, so Robert, I think that was great. That was really a good overview, a good recap, also taking into account the feedback that we had gotten from the last session. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
Yeah, welcome.
Good. With this, I think we're done for today. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Please retweet or whatever, and then we'll talk to each other next week again.
Yeah. So bye bye. Next time.
Bye bye.